what, from a leadership perspective, like what is influence? And to me, like that is your currency as a leader. That is the power that you have as a leader is influence. Without influence, you cannot lead.
Like it or not, we work in a world that is often divided, and we call that division by a lot of different names. Sometimes it might be blue collar and white collar. In the military, it's officer versus enlisted, engineer versus technician. In the more formal HR world, it can be exempt versus non-exempt, otherwise known as salary versus hourly. Now, I generally think that people are people, and leading one group of people is very similar to leading another group of people. But we do have to acknowledge that those groups often have different experiences, different expectations, or different incentives. And we have to realize that when it comes to leading those people. Our guest today is Rich Phipps, the former manager of technicians and development tests at SpaceX's McGregor test facility. Like me, Rich started his career in the military, serving as a submariner in the U.S. Navy. He left the Navy to join SpaceX, where he started as a data and control systems technician and moved his way up through leadership in what I have to believe is the most dynamic work environment in the world. I'm really excited to talk with Rich today about his experiences in that environment and what successful leadership looks like from his perspective. So, Rich, welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hey, Matt. Thanks, man. And definitely appreciate that introduction. And I'm super stoked to talk with you today.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited because as we were reflecting a little bit before this, I think the reason why I had that intro is because I just thought back to it and realized like the vast majority of people that I have had on do come from more of the engineering to leadership track. And I think you might be the first person that came from the technician to leadership track. And so, like I said, I think a lot of it's a lot of things are the same, but I'm sure there's some things that are different. And so I'm really excited to chat with you. So I'd love to start with you just maybe taking a minute to flesh a little bit more about what has your career been like? What were your experiences at McGregor? For anybody who maybe hasn't gotten the experience of standing a few hundred feet away from a Merlin engine test firing.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Like you said, it's crazy dynamic. As the development and test, or on the development test team specifically, the things that we were responsible for is exactly in the title. Like with SpaceX kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible and doing things that literally no one's ever done before. Like all of those technologies, whether they be at the vehicle scale or even all the way down to the component scale, it was our job to figure out, if those ideas were going to work, if they were going to break, how are they going to break? And obviously the goal was to figure out, how are they going to break before we fly them? And that's not always the case, as we've seen, in the last 15 or so years. And when things don't go as planned, that comes right back to this team. Like, hey, that didn't behave like we thought it was going to behave. So let's go figure out, what was different. What didn't we think of? So super dynamic, always go, go, go for sure.
Yeah. It's one thing that always impressed me just whenever I was there. You hear about a mishap. And I think this is true in any organization, just like the faster you can go from mishap happening to hardware testing what happened, like the faster you can do that, the better. Mm-hmm. And I was always impressed by how, sometimes it seemed like it was same day. It was just incredible.
Sometimes it was. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's rewind a little bit. You spent a bunch of time in the Navy, and you went up the enlisted ranks to become a senior enlisted leader. What was your first experience leading people? And what were some of the things that kind of, surprised you about that? And what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah. Kind of thinking back, I joined the Navy way back in 2003. Went up to, like you said, to the enlisted ranks, and, moving up in the Navy, at least on the enlisted side, before you get to formal leadership, which I think, to kind of put it a parallel to civilian terms, like I think E7, at least in the Navy, and it's different, depending on what branch you're in the Air Force, so it may be different, where you were. On the enlisted side, like E7, E8, and E9 in the Navy are your like formal people leaders. Like I would say like that's the dividing line between like, in the civilian world, like a lead technician would be like an E6. First class petty officer in the Navy, whereas an E7 and above is like your supervisor, your manager, senior manager, whatever, going up. Um, and, I made E7 chief relatively early in my career. I think I was at just over 6 years in. Yeah, so it's not uncommon in the nuclear program, which I served in the Navy, for folks to be promoted into formal leadership very early in their careers. So during my time as junior enlisted, you get real good at your job. Um, you're making friends, you're, creating all these relationships and stuff, but you're not really like super thinking about, the very next step for me is like this crazy jump to formal leadership. And maybe I should start thinking about those things. And there are programs that are available in the Navy to kind of help jumpstart that.
Yeah.
But if I'm being honest, and of course I'm speaking my own experience here, like that wasn't a super priority, at least when I was in. And talking to some of my peers that have stayed in the Navy, they're in over 20 years now, that's becoming more of a priority, which is really, really great to hear. So it isn't such a crazy jump like I experienced. But I think the biggest shift for me was like as junior enlisted, I had the questions, and I always had someone that I know that I could go to that would have an answer for a question, or at least know where to find the answer, or who to talk
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And the instant that, in the Navy, you pin your anchors on your lapel, you just became that guy, or whether you're ready for it or not,
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing for me, because junior enlisted, your questions are mostly technical, or the problems that you have to solve are mostly technical. And then you step in, as a chief, senior enlisted, the problems grow in scope. And now you have, obviously, you're the technical expert in your division, but you're also the people expert, in
Yeah.
your division. And that was the biggest jump for me. It's like, technical problems, they can get pretty complex, but they pale in comparison to the complexity to some of the, human problems that leaders have to face on a daily basis. So I think that was the biggest surprise for me.
That's interesting that you say that, because it's one of the things that I often reflect on from my time in the military, about how in the military, there kind of is, I suppose, but there's not really like an HR department. It's like the leadership is the HR department.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so just there's a lot of things that often maybe your average technical leader kind of just like pushes off to like, oh, those people will figure it out. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, like if there's a pay issue, it's like your troops are going to come to you and be like,
Yep.
hey, boss, I have a pay issue. Can you help me solve it? And you got to help them solve it.
Yeah.
And you can't just be
Yeah.
like, go talk to payroll.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, hey, I'm having, some difficulties at home or something, and those are junior enlisted,
Yeah.
that's like kind of like a taboo thing. Like, it's none of my business, but as soon as you hit E7, boom, that is 100% your business and something that you have to deal with. Like you said, no HR department, no one else to deflect those questions toward. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the biggest surprise for me. And it was a very steep learning curve.
Yeah. How did that experience tra- go follow you when you left the military and you went to SpaceX? What was that transition like? Because I believe like for a while you became an individual contributor again, you were a technician, but
Mhm.
like what was that transition?
Yeah. So the transition from, you know, senior enlisted leader to basically entry level, position at SpaceX, it was a lot different. So you go from being in a place, and this is after 12 years of being in the Navy at this point. Like
Yeah.
that is all in my professional career. That's all that I know. That's the only experience I've ever had. Um, and you go from knowing just about everything that you can know about your craft after having been, in that long, to embarking on this new adventure where, and this was funny when I left, SpaceX, um, of course, everyone's like speech, 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 and I actually
Yeah.
talked about this transition, and I said, when I showed up, I thought, frankly, I was like, I'm hot shit, you know,
Yeah.
I think coming
I
out of the
know it's
Navy, it's like, hey, I'm senior enlisted, I made rank super young, like relatively intelligent. At least what people told me, I'll figure it out. This is going to be an easy gig, whatever. And I was immediately humbled, you know,
yeah.
going, going from senior enlisted leader to individual contributor again. in an area where like I did have some professional knowledge, right? My job in the Navy, my rate was an electrician's mate. So my function on the ship was to operate the electrical distribution systems.
Yeah.
The reactor turned some steam turbines made electricity, and I pumped electricity around the ship. And at SpaceX, I was a data and control systems technician. So I had all of the basic electrical theory and all that knowledge and the experience to back up that. But as that applies to a Falcon 9, at the time, or a Dragon capsule at the time, I was on the Dragon team. That's when I started. I knew nothing. I knew
Yeah.
nothing about, the data acquisition systems, the specific sensors, and all the things that we were going to use. So I was humbled immediately and basically had to start over. But what I did bring was my leadership experience. And I think it's an important thing to know, and this isn't new, and you'll hear a lot of people say this, especially in leadership, is like, leadership doesn't come from a title or a position, right? Leadership is something that can emerge, based on, characteristics or traits or whatever. And in my case, it was just experience. So yeah, I didn't have the authority to lead folks, but I had, the skill and the ability to. And that's kind of what started paving the way for me to move up quickly through, the SpaceX ranks, if you will, as well.
Yeah, I definitely in my book that just came out, I have a brief discussion about this whole dichotomy between management and leadership because people talk about that a lot. And honestly, to me, I think you can define it a million different ways, but to me, the biggest difference is just that leadership is something that you do, and management is a position you hold. And so you're put into a managerial position, whatever level that is. But then but leading is something separate where you can do it with or without that position. You should always be doing it with that position, hopefully. But yeah, I think you're right. It's not leadership itself has nothing to do with position.
Yeah. And both are important. A lot of people like say, yeah, like management is over here and leadership is over here. And separately and on their own, like, I don't think you may realize the success that you want to realize, but you have to use them both in conjunction in order to get there.
Yeah.
Which reminds me another thing, military, versus SpaceX, and kind of some of the things I brought over. Like you mentioned before, that dichotomy of responsibilities. And in the military, you have officer, you have enlisted, and in the civilian world, at least at SpaceX, you have, engineer versus technician. And one thing that I brought with me from the Navy was that mindset of enlisted would be like the technician, and the officers would be like engineers. And unfortunately in the military, well, not unfortunately in the military, but it just doesn't translate very well that, in the Navy or in the military in general, like your very lowest ranking officer still technically outranks your highest ranking enlisted person.
Yes.
Yeah. Like brand new, fresh 01 out of college, outranks the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy that's been in for 47 years.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Of course, in practice, it doesn't really work that way. Like we all know our roles and stuff. But you still have to throw that salute up, and, I brought that with me to SpaceX. And during the time that I joined, like the McGregor site, it was growing pretty rapidly. And, leadership positions on various teams were coming available. And what I saw was, a lot of very smart and very talented engineers getting promoted into these, manager positions, leadership positions in general, and not a whole lot on the technician side. And so that created kind of a culture of, technicians reporting to, engineers, similar to in the military where, enlisted folks, were outranked by officers. And I think that in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem, at least what I saw in my experience, was that, yeah, like I said, you have these brilliant engineers and they're super, super smart, but they lack the actual like leadership experience. And that kind of goes back to my experience I was talking about before in the Navy, where I have all this technical knowledge, and then now all of a sudden I'm responsible for like humans and all their complexity and their
Yeah.
lives and
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there are a couple of managers that struggle with that, you know. Uh,
Hmm.
and at that point, I kind of started rising up. I became a lead technician a year or so after I joined SpaceX, and then almost immediately was promoted to a supervisor position where now I had some formal leadership responsibilities. And I think it was at that point where some of my fellow technicians had been around for long enough, and we started working together to understand, you know, what were the weaknesses of the organization and what we could do, and from a leadership perspective, and
Yeah.
what we could do to make the organization work better together. And that relationship specifically between the engineering teams and the technician teams.
Yeah. How do you, because I think that's really important, because especially when a hard tech company is growing, like there can be an early phase where it's just a bunch of engineers kind of chewing on CAD
Hmm.
designs and the things. And then at some point you have to make it real. And very often that
Hmm.
means bringing in a bunch of people with a different skill set.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What are some of the ways that you can effectively make sure is a team that doesn't become divided into different camps?
Yeah, and the biggest thing, if you could slap like one word on it, it's like communication. That's like
Okay.
the
Yeah.
the word. Communication is the solution to a lot of problems in
Yeah.
organizations and leadership in general. But like engineers and technicians, right? We're peers. We work together. We're all here to do the thing, right? To accomplish the mission of the organization. But we have different skills and abilities and experiences. And I think that engineer comes in, you know, fresh out of college, maybe no life experience outside of college, and not a whole lot of experience working with, you know, industry professionals that maybe don't have that degree or the academics, but they have been in industry, like working with their hands. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
technicians and stuff. So you could have 10, 20 plus years of experience, like doing the thing, uh, or you can have the academia and the 4, 6, 8 what years experience, like learning, how to design the thing. But each of those on their own, not very successful. You got to use them in conjunction.
Yeah.
And I think getting that point across, both sides of the line, because technicians, what's the biggest rubs? Like engineer designs this thing, and it's like it's
We
impossible to
can't make
build. It's
that. Come on.
impossible to
Yeah.
do maintenance on, or it's impossible.
Yes.
There's always like something that's like,
Yeah.
hey, if you ever built one of these before, it's so obvious you would know that this design is terrible. An engineer is like looking at a technician, or like, what say you about my design? You've never designed anything. Like, you don't
Yes.
know the crazy amount of physics or the crazy amount of, math and, engineering that has to go, that has gone into this design, and you just get like this butting of heads.
Yeah.
And, and the only way to make that work is, I mean, you got to get those two people in a room and you got to get them communicating with each other. It's like, from a technician perspective, you know, what is it about this design that has you frustrated? Let's talk about it. And from the engineer perspective, what can I do in order to make this better? And really getting all that feedback and making changes. And that's where the trust starts to get built. So then you make a small change here. The technician's like, oh, engineer listens to me, and incorporated some of my feedback into the design. It works better. The engineer gets that positive feedback from the technicians. Hey, this system is great. It's easy to work on. It's easy to build. Let's do more of this. This makes us faster and more efficient. And then it's just those smaller wins start to stack up. And then eventually, it takes time, but eventually you have a team where the engineer is like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Technician, let's get in way earlier in this design process,
Yeah.
and give me your feedback, and give me your ideas, and let's just work together from the start on these things. And then that's when it happens, and that,
Yeah.
that productivity and efficiency it explodes.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned communication, you mentioned trust. Like, yeah, what are some of the other things that you think are really essential to leading in these like really dynamic environments. Cause like you said, like sometimes day of, something blew up, go figure it out. So how do you successfully lead in an environment that's changing that quickly?
You have to minimize the distractions. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, it's really easy to say, but it's really hard to do. And it's not like, like a one-step process. Okay, what are we going to do today? We're going to minimize distractions. All right. Well,
Yeah.
what does
Put
that
it on
look
the wall.
like?
No
Yeah.
distractions. We're done.
So, I spent the last 6 years that I was at SpaceX, in a manager role over a few different teams actually, and actually like merging some teams together to create even more, bigger, more capable teams and stuff. And when it comes to minimizing distractions, I think the most important thing is you need to figure out what the distractions are first, and that's all
Yeah,
about
what's an example?
communicating
When you
to.
say
Yeah.
distractions, what do you mean?
Okay. I think this is the best example I can give is, um, and it's kind of a big one, but like career progression, you
Okay.
know. Yeah, it's a big one, but I think that in my 6 years as a manager, this was probably the biggest detractor from maximizing the efficiency of the team. Is like I'm a technician and I come in, like I have the tactical things like, okay, today this is what we're doing today. I need to like physically build this thing today. It's pretty straightforward. But in the back of your mind, it's like, what does my career look like a year from now? What does my career look like 5 years from now? Like, what's my path to like moving up? If that's my desire to move up within an organization, or maybe move laterally and get into this other area of the organization. Like, what are my avenues? Or am I just, I'm going to come to work and every day I'm going to build the thing.
Hmm.
You know, when I first started at SpaceX, I think one of the biggest questions, because that was a question I had. Like I said,
Yeah.
I came from senior enlisted in the Navy. I came in, at an entry level position. Like, of course, I want to get back into leadership. That's what I'm
Yeah.
passionate about. What is my path there? And I asked my lead and my supervisor at the time, and there really wasn't a path charted out for career progression in any like meaningful
Mhm.
way, other than like, hey, if you're just really good at your job and you've been around for long enough, like, maybe something will happen.
I'm really interested in the way you're framing this because I feel like, especially over the last few years, there's been so much of a push of putting careers in the hands of the employees.
Hmm.
Like, we're going to make you like you like chart your course, come up with your project that you're going to get this skill on so you can apply to this role. And that's a lot of mental energy that you're
Hmm.
now putting on that employee. Um, versus what I'm hearing you say is just like, if you're a manager and you can at least have those conversations
Hmm.
and flesh that out in one-on-ones or something, now
Hmm.
that person isn't spending all of their day-to-day time thinking about it. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm driving towards. Like, that's takes up so much mental space to tell,
Yeah.
an entry level technician, or like, hey, if you want to move up, like it's in your hands, and you
Yeah.
need to figure that out. Like that's terrible. It's a terrible thing to do. And what we did is, I sat down. I was a supervisor at the time, so I sat down with all of my peers in McGregor, and even some of our managers. Our next level supervisors at the time. We were like, hey, we need to really start thinking about how to chart out career paths for like, all these different, because in McGregor, there are hundreds of different careers that actually happen there.
Yeah.
It's not just group of engineer, group of
Yeah.
technicians. It's like this wide array of skill and experience. Um, so we need to take a look at like, you know, what are our expectations as supervisors and managers? Like what skills are important? Aspirationally, like what we need to be looking out in the future, and like what skills are we going to need in the future, and how do we bridge that gap?
Hmm.
If there is that gap that's there in terms of the skills that we have on hand right now, and how do we chart out a career path that is more than just like a couple of months? Like I checked off the 5 things you told me to do. Like Do I get a promotion? That type of thing.
Yeah.
So I sat down with my peers and managers, and we started talking about what are all the core responsibilities that we want. And this is for technicians.
Yeah.
The engineering expectations are a little bit different. And it took us several months, but over a period of several months, we finally had like an actual career path with discrete levels of growth between each level of technician. And at SpaceX we had the 5 levels of technicians from apprentice to like a senior level technician. Like what things that you need to be able to demonstrate, like what experience you need to have, and all those things. But we also brought in the technicians, and we went one step below. We went to the lead technicians. These are the guys, boots on the ground, like doing the thing every single day. And we said, like, hey, this is the list that we came up with. Like, what do you guys think about this? And there are a lot of things where they were like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. We don't do these things anymore. And so we were like, make suggestions and we can make changes. So we iterated that based on the input of the technicians. And then on the other end of it, we had these, very well thought out technician career growth paths for them. And so that was like one less thing. And it's a big thing that technicians needed to worry about and take up that mental and emotional space in their minds so they could get focused on the things that they need to be doing on a daily basis. That was a huge tangent, but I think that would be considered, in my mind, a very big distraction. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think, because I'm a big believer is that, a leader needs to be doing 3 things. They need to get people to work together, get them working on the right things, and improve their work over time.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to work on the right things is all about figuring out what's it's that old saying, the most important thing is keeping the most important thing the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And just continue asking yourself, like, how can I help my team move faster? How can I eliminate distractions? How can I give them the resources that they need? It is just a critical element of leadership.
Yeah. And I think that was the one that we wanted to tackle first, because in, high reliability organizations or organizations that move quickly like SpaceX, like at the very start of it, like you're hiring folks that are the hard chargers that, they're the guys that are going to just go, do, right? And that's a double-edged sword because, they're going to put in the work and they're going to go 100 miles an hour in whatever direction they go in, unless like leadership like focuses that energy in a direction that's meaningful for the organization, So that, I think that was the most meat on the bone that we could find with like increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization was let's focus all this energy in a direction that makes sense. And that was one way to do it.
Just a quick interjection. I wanted to remind you that I run a company called Built, where we train the next generation of hard tech leaders how to build teams capable of solving the world's hardest problems. If you are an aspiring technical leader, an existing leader, or responsible for training leaders in your organization, please check out builtleaders.com to see if we can support you and your team.
I think it was kind of a sidebar, but I think it's just such a critical element of being an effective leader and giving people that's the space that they need and the focus that they need. Before we started talking, I want to make sure we brought this up, because before we started talking, you mentioned a definition of leadership that you had kept with you and really important to you. Has that come up yet? Or because I'd love to hear, because I don't think it has.
Yeah. No, you get me going, Matt, and I'll just go 100 miles an hour, like I was just saying, down whatever path we go down.
Yeah.
No, but the definition of leadership of a leader that has really stuck with me throughout my career is this, and it sounds a little textbooky, so bear with me there, but there are some keywords in there that I like to pull out. So the definition of a leader is someone who selects, equips, trains, and influences one or more persons who have diverse gifts, abilities, and skills, and aligns them to the organization's objectives, inspiring them to willingly and enthusiastically expend emotional and physical energy in a concerted effort to achieve the mission. Super long definition.
Super long, but I love it. There's a lot in there.
There's so much to unpack in there, and that's why I love it so much. So the five keywords in there were influences was the first one. The second one was diverse, talking about gifts and abilities, skill set thing. Alignment, super important. We were kind of just talking about that. Inspiration, that one's important. That gets way deep into motivation, which is important.
Yep.
And then a concerted effort. I think those are the five words that basically like shape what's important to me as a leader. And so, like the first one we talked about influence. So, what from a leadership perspective, like what is influence? And to me, like that is your currency as a leader. That is the power that you have as a leader is influence. Without influence, you cannot lead. It is not possible. And there's a lot of different ways that you can influence leader, and that can be the dividing line, or influence folks, and that can be the dividing line between like good leaders and bad leaders.
Yep.
But yeah, to influence is to have an impact on behaviors and attitude and outcomes and things like that. And obviously, a leader wants people to follow them because like they're aligned, and not necessarily like I'm just a leader like telling you what to do. And that kind of goes back, we were talking about with the military. It's like, whatever my collar device is kind of tells the world in military terms, like I'm this, I outrank you, you have to do what I say. That is a form of influence, but that does not translate, especially over in SpaceX.
Yeah.
The second one was diverse, and that's talking about like the abilities and the skills and the experience of the people on your team. And one of the most important things as a leader is to know your team, like really know them. If you talk to anyone that's ever worked with me at SpaceX, the one thing that I always say is my expectations for the people that are on my team and work with me is that we create meaningful relationships with each other and with the teams that we work closely with. And there's no limit to how far that can expand, always be creating those relationships. But focusing on like being a leader of a team, you really need to understand like as many like facets of an individual as you can to really understand like one, how to motivate them. What are their motivations in general? Like what gets them out of bed in the morning? And also from a personal perspective, like what are the things that they're dealing with, as human beings? I always say like, take care of the human as best as you can. And like the mission is going to happen. That's like a byproduct of taking care of humans as humans. You're going to get the most that that they have the offer, or you're going to get the most out of them that they have the offer to offer if you take care of them as human beings.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to diversity. So like, you really have to know your teams to understand like what their skills and abilities are and the experience that they have. It's very, very important. The next one talks about alignment. We were talking about that a little bit before. And that's just as a leader, having a clear understanding of what the purpose of your team is. Like what function do you play in the overall organization, and making absolutely sure that everyone on your team understands that as well. Tying their individual effort and their impact on a daily basis to the mission at large, keep them connected. In the inspiration piece, like I said before, that was talking about how your team is motivated. You can motivate them by outranking them and them having to do what
Not get yelled
you
at.
say to do. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, for fear of reprimand, right? I'm going to do what you tell me to do, because if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble. And that motivates me to do what you're telling me to do. And that works to a point, but you're never going to get any more than that. Right.
Yeah. It's the line from The Office, right? The movie, or Office Space. It's from Office Space. Where Bob, that's going to motivate someone to do just enough to not get fired.
Exactly. 100%. But, as a leader, you really want to tap into that intrinsic motivation. And that kind of goes back to really knowing your team and what makes them tick. And then the last one was the concerted effort. And, that's about having a shared purpose. You have all these individuals on your team. You want to get them all pointed in the same direction, which is alignment, but you also like want them to like prop each other up too, And I think that's super important. And that goes back to the creating relationships. So yeah, as a manager, I expect my supervisors to create relationships with their individuals on their team, but I also have an expectation for each individual contributor on the team to like create relationships with each other, understand what their complementary strengths and weaknesses are. It's like, I'm not really great at this, but Joe is awesome at this. So we're going to bring Joe in or whatever, it's a simple example. But then you get this crazy like amount of collaboration and communication that comes out of that. And then that all turns into like this force multiplication, that on the surface, maybe you don't see it, but like when you get everyone working together, you get, what's the word I'm looking for? I had it, but I lost it. It's that buzzword that everyone either like really loves or really hates. Yes, synergy.
Yeah. There you go. There's a consultant word for you.
It is okay. Yeah. But yeah, those were the 5 key words that come out of that definition, and it's like all of that working together can really turn a team around.
Yeah. This has been a fantastic discussion, Rich. Thank you so much for your service, for talking us through kind of what you learned in your service, for your time at SpaceX. And I can only imagine how many early mornings, late nights that you went through while you were there. But which is exactly why this kind of stuff is so important. I think, leadership can often take a side seat in good times when things are going well. When things are going well, maybe you can get away with not great leadership or not a lot of trust. But it's when things go wrong where it's like, if you don't have those things, it's just not good. So it's been really great from hearing from you. I'm sure I'll reach out again for some talks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Matt. It's been a pleasure. Let's talk again soon.